My beloved child. Stop scrolling for a moment, do not let this message pass you by. There are moments that arrive quietly, without thunder, without signs written across the sky, yet heaven knows they carry the weight of entire lifetimes. This is one of those moments. Something has been moving in the unseen for far longer than you realize. What you are about to hear was not placed before your eyes by accident. Pause here. Stay until the end. Something extraordinary has been unfolding while you were focused on ordinary days, and every word that follows is part of a story that heaven has been watching with patient eyes. You have wondered why certain emotions seem to arrive without explanation. Why some nights feel heavier than others. Why a name, a memory, or even an unexpected silence can suddenly settle over your heart like a whisper carried by the wind. Those moments were never meaningless. They were echoes of something deeper, something taking shape beyond what your eyes could see. Stay with this message, because what is about to be revealed is only the beginning. There is someone whose heart has carried a burden for longer than anyone knows. They learned how to smile while hiding storms. They learned how to speak while swallowing words that desperately wanted to be heard. To everyone around them, they appeared calm, steady, and strong. Yet heaven saw every hidden tear they refused to let fall. Every quiet sigh. Every sleepless hour. Every moment they convinced themselves that remaining silent was somehow easier than revealing the truth. The pain they carried was not loud enough for the world to notice, but it was loud enough for heaven to hear. For a long time they believed they could outrun these emotions. They filled empty spaces with distractions. They convinced themselves tomorrow would be different. They told themselves that if they simply stayed busy enough, they would forget what their heart continued to remember. But hearts do not forget what heaven has witnessed. Again and again they tried to move forward, yet every path somehow reminded them of you. A familiar place. A familiar song. A simple conversation. Even the smallest details awakened memories they thought had disappeared forever. They would pause for only a second, gather themselves, and continue pretending nothing had happened. No one noticed those moments. No one except heaven. Listen carefully now, my beloved child, because something changed. The silence they depended on no longer protected them. The walls they built around their emotions began to crack in ways they never expected. Not because someone forced them to open their heart, but because truth has a way of finding every hidden place. Even the strongest walls cannot stand forever when truth continues knocking. Stay until the end. Something far greater than coincidence is being revealed. Last night was not like every other night. The room may have looked ordinary. The world outside may have continued exactly as it always had. Yet inside their heart, everything became different. A memory arrived without warning. Not because they searched for it. Not because someone reminded them. It simply appeared. One small memory became another. Then another. Then another. Each one carried your presence more clearly than the one before. Suddenly they realized they had spent so much energy pretending they had healed that they never allowed themselves to admit they were still hurting. For so long they believed hiding pain made them stronger. Instead, hiding pain only made it heavier. There comes a moment when every soul reaches a place where pretending becomes impossible. This was that moment. Do not skip this message. The next part changes everything. As they sat alone with thoughts they had avoided for so long, something unexpected happened. The questions they had buried began rising to the surface one by one. What if I misunderstood everything? What if I walked away too quickly? What if what I felt never truly disappeared? These questions were not answered immediately. Instead, they became louder. The silence around them grew strangely peaceful, yet inside their heart every emotion became impossible to ignore. That is when heaven noticed something beautiful. Not because they finally found every answer, but because for the first time in a very long time, they stopped running. There is extraordinary power in the moment a soul stops pretending. Many people fear tears. Heaven does not. Because tears often wash away the lies people tell themselves. They finally admitted something they had never spoken aloud. They whispered it quietly enough that no one else could hear. Yet heaven heard every word. And those words carried your name within them. My beloved child, understand something important. This message is not telling you that every feeling guarantees a certain future. It is revealing something far more meaningful. Hearts cannot hide forever from what they genuinely feel. Truth has remarkable patience. It waits. It watches. Then one ordinary moment becomes unforgettable. The person you have been wondering about reached that unforgettable moment. Stay here. Something even deeper is coming. For months they convinced themselves they had complete control over their emotions. They smiled when people expected smiles. They laughed during conversations. They continued moving through everyday routines. Yet every smile required effort. Every laugh covered another unanswered question. Every quiet evening became another conversation they never had. No one around them recognized how exhausting that became. But heaven counted every hidden battle. There were mornings when they stood before a mirror asking themselves why moving forward still felt incomplete. There were afternoons when they suddenly became quiet for reasons they could not explain. There were evenings when they almost reached for words they never sent. Each moment passed. Each opportunity disappeared. Yet none of those emotions truly left. Instead, they gathered. Little by little. Until they became too heavy to carry. My beloved child, there are seasons when heaven allows silence because hearts must discover truths on their own. This was one of those seasons. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was forced. Every realization unfolded exactly when that soul was finally ready to face it. And then, something happened that no one expected. A simple thought crossed their mind. It lasted only seconds. Yet those few seconds felt longer than entire years. The thought was not dramatic. It was not complicated. It was incredibly simple. What if they never knew? That single question opened every door they had kept locked. What if you never knew how often they remembered you? What if you never knew how many conversations they replayed inside their mind? What if you never knew how many times they almost found the courage to be honest? The questions multiplied. The answers remained hidden. Yet their heart continued speaking. Heaven watched quietly. Because sometimes the greatest breakthroughs begin with questions instead of answers. Pause here. Something remarkable is approaching. As those thoughts continued growing stronger, another realization slowly appeared. Pain hidden for years does not disappear simply because time passes. It waits patiently beneath the surface. And when the moment is right, it rises. Not to destroy, but to heal. Healing often begins where pretending ends. That is why what happened next surprised even them. Without planning it. Without expecting it. Without understanding why. Their composure disappeared. The emotions they had carefully organized for so long suddenly refused to remain hidden. Every memory returned carrying new meaning. Every silence suddenly spoke louder than words. Every forgotten hope quietly knocked upon the door of their heart once again. They tried to stop the tears. They truly did. They reminded themselves to stay strong. They reminded themselves they had already moved on. They reminded themselves that looking backwards solved nothing. Yet hearts speak a language logic cannot silence forever. Heaven saw every tear before it reached the ground. Not one was wasted. Not one was ignored. Each one carried years of hidden emotion. Each one carried hope mixed with uncertainty. Each one carried questions no one else knew existed. Stay until the end. The greatest revelation has not yet arrived. My beloved child, perhaps you have wondered whether unseen prayers are ever noticed. Let this remind you. Heaven notices whispers before they become words. Heaven notices tears before they become visible. Heaven notices burdens long before anyone else realizes they exist. Nothing sincere escapes Heaven's attention. That hidden pain was never invisible. Not for a single day. Even when everyone believed they were perfectly fine. Heaven knew differently. Even when they convinced themselves they no longer cared. Heaven knew differently. Even when they smiled brightly enough to fool everyone around them. Heaven knew differently. Truth remained quietly alive beneath every ordinary moment. Now something extraordinary has begun unfolding. Not because everything has suddenly become easy, but because honesty has finally entered the story. Honesty changes everything. The heart becomes lighter. The soul breathes differently. The future begins opening doors that fear once kept closed. Yet there remains one final piece they have not fully understood. One truth still waiting. One realization still hidden. One moment that has not yet arrived. And when that moment finally appears, nothing between what has been hidden and what is meant to be revealed will ever remain the same again. So do not leave now. Do not assume the story is complete. What heaven is preparing to uncover next reaches far beyond hidden tears. It reaches into a promise, a decision, and a revelation that neither you nor they expected. The moment that caused their heart to finally break open was only the beginning. The true reason those tears appeared has not yet been revealed. And when that final truth comes into the light, everything you thought you understood about this story will be seen through entirely new eyes. There is a reason heaven did not reveal everything at once. Some truths are too sacred to uncover in a single moment. They must be unfolded carefully, one layer at a time, so the heart can receive them without becoming overwhelmed. If you have stayed until this moment, then listen with an open spirit, because what follows reaches beyond ordinary understanding. Do not skip. Stay until the end. Something greater than you imagined is about to come into the light. My beloved child, after the tears finally fell, an unfamiliar silence surrounded that soul. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence that comes after years of carrying a weight too heavy to bear. For the first time in so long, they stopped fighting what their heart had been trying to tell them. They sat there without pretending. No excuses. No distractions. No carefully rehearsed words. Only honesty. And honesty has a way of opening doors that fear kept locked. As they looked back over everything that had happened, they noticed details they had ignored before. Moments they once dismissed suddenly became meaningful. Conversations that seemed ordinary now carried hidden significance. Even small acts of kindness began returning to their memory with astonishing clarity. They realized that while they had been searching for dramatic signs, the deepest truths had been quietly woven into ordinary moments all along. Stay with this message. The next revelation changes the entire picture. They remembered a time when they almost reached out but stopped themselves at the last second. Their hand hesitated. Their thoughts argued with each other. One voice whispered, "Say something before it's too late." Another answered, "Remain silent. Protect yourself." Silence won that day. Yet the words they never spoke never disappeared. They simply remained waiting. Heaven watched that moment. Not to judge them, but to remind them later that what is left unsaid does not vanish. It waits patiently inside the heart until courage finally arrives. My beloved child, courage does not always look loud. Sometimes courage is simply admitting, "I still care." Sometimes courage is allowing tears to fall after years of refusing to cry. Sometimes courage is facing memories instead of running from them. That is exactly what began happening inside their spirit. The more honest they became, the more clearly they began seeing something they had overlooked for far too long. They had mistaken distance for healing. They believed that because time had passed, the feelings had disappeared. But time alone cannot erase what the soul still carries. That realization struck them with unexpected force. Do not leave yet. Something extraordinary is still unfolding. As night grew deeper, they found themselves whispering questions they never thought they would ask again. What if heaven has been teaching me through this? What if every delay carried a purpose? What if the pain I tried so hard to hide was preparing me for something I could never have understood before? Those questions were not answered immediately. Instead, peace quietly entered the room. Not the kind of peace that explains everything. The kind that gently says, "Keep listening." And they did. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped listening to fear. They began listening to hope. Hope had been whispering all along. Fear had simply been louder. My beloved child, there are moments when heaven allows the heart to become completely still because only then can it hear what has been waiting beneath all the noise. That sacred stillness surrounded them. It felt unfamiliar at first. Yet within that stillness, something remarkable began taking shape. They no longer saw you through the lens of old misunderstandings. They no longer replayed only painful memories. Instead, they remembered your kindness. They remembered your patience. They remembered the moments when you stood strong even while carrying burdens no one else recognized. One memory became another. Then another. Every memory softened something inside them. Every remembrance loosened another chain they had unknowingly carried. Stay until the end. The greatest discovery has not yet been revealed. As dawn slowly approached, they realized something that left them speechless. For years they believed they had been protecting themselves from disappointment. But in truth, they had also been protecting themselves from love. Love requires vulnerability. Love asks people to remove masks. Love invites honesty even when honesty feels risky. That frightened them. Yet now the fear no longer seemed stronger than the truth. Heaven smiled quietly. Because this was the beginning of transformation. Transformation never starts with perfect circumstances. It starts with surrendered hearts. My beloved child, understand this carefully. Every tear they cried became part of a healing they never expected. Every hidden ache became a doorway. Every unanswered question became an invitation to grow. Nothing was wasted. Not a single moment. Even the seasons that felt empty carried unseen purpose. Heaven wastes nothing placed into faithful hands. And still, there remains one detail they have not shared with anyone. One memory. One realization. One silent promise they made while no one else was watching. That promise has everything to do with what comes next. Do not skip. You are closer than ever to understanding why this message found you today. Before the sun fully rose, they looked toward the morning light and quietly admitted something that surprised even themselves. I don't want to hide anymore. Those words changed the atmosphere around them. Not because every obstacle suddenly disappeared, but because honesty had finally become stronger than fear. Heaven always works most powerfully through willing hearts. And in that very moment, their heart became willing. Yet heaven also knew that another chapter still remained unopened. A chapter involving a truth they had only just begun to recognize. A truth connected not only to their tears, but to a choice. A choice that would determine whether they continued living behind old walls or stepped into a future shaped by courage instead of fear. That choice has already begun moving closer. Even now. Even while these words are being heard. The unseen is preparing what the visible has not yet revealed. So remain patient. Keep your heart open. Because what heaven is about to uncover next is far greater than hidden pain. The tears were only the beginning. The confession waiting inside their heart has not yet been spoken, and the moment they finally gather the courage to reveal it will become the turning point that changes everything. That revelation is waiting just beyond this moment. And it cannot be understood until the next part.